Hello boys and girls, and welcome back to the Art Lab. It's Mr. D here. Today I'm going to expose you to a new type of art and a new artist. Let's jump right in. So obviously, it's called abstract art. A-B-S-T-R-A-C-T art. And if we look at the definition of abstract art, the definition is art that does not attempt to represent reality, but seeks to achieve its effect using shapes, forms, colors, and textures. So, shapes, forms, colors, and textures are some of the elements of art that we've already learned about this year. So let's take a look at some abstract art and see how it uses shapes, form, colors, and textures to achieve its effects. So here are a few different kinds of abstract art. And the one thing you'll notice is that none of them look very real. And that's what abstract means. It means that it is intentionally different from reality. Colors are exaggerated and kind of crazy. Shapes can be wild and out of proportion, or there can be no subject at all. If we look at this painting here, you can see that the leaves of the trees are really just blobs of color. And it looks like there's a person on the path, but it's not very detailed. So, abstract art can sometimes have objects in it, like trees and people, but sometimes they can look a little different from real life. Here is an abstract art piece by Pablo Picasso, one of the most famous abstract artists who ever lived. Obviously, this is a woman with a guitar, and there are some flowers in a vase behind her, but obviously it also doesn't look quite right either. When features are exaggerated like this, we call it heavily stylized. And that is a perfect description of abstract art. It's heavily stylized. Here is what appears to be two people holding each other and kissing. But they're also very much made of strange shapes. Like if you look at the shape around them, there's an oval, there's a half circle right there, there's a weird blobby bean shape. So in most abstract art, you'll notice an extreme use of shape and color. In this one here, we have big blotches of gray and white painted on top of a yellow background. In this one here, it makes lots of use of the circular shape and very bright pastel colors. Pastel colors are very light colors. Here's another one that uses a lot of line. Let's see if we can see that full screen here. So this one uses a lot of line work to kind of convey a lot of energy. If you look closely, this appears to be a cityscape. There are buildings in the background, and there's a road that goes through it. And on top of the road, there's all of this kind of commotion and blue, exaggerated, scratchy, triangular shape outlines. And these kind of just make you think about it being busy on the highway. There are some other ways we can convey feelings with abstract art, too. When you use lots of warm colors, obviously it gives the abstract art a fiery, hot kind of appearance. The same goes if you use cool colors. So if we look up a cool colored abstract painting, you see that these are kind of icy and chilled and relaxed. Some of them are very green and kind of give you a springtime vibe, or maybe that looks like a top-down view of the planet Earth. But that appears to be ink pouring artwork, where you drop ink onto the canvas and let it flow into each other. Abstract art isn't usually made with a paintbrush. It can be, but there are lots of different ways to achieve texture on the canvas. And to illustrate this, Mr. D will show you two art pieces that he made in the abstract style. So here is one. And this piece of art was made by squirting paint onto the canvas all over, and then folding it in half and smushing it together. So you can see the way that these different kinds of blobs have different textures. Wherever I applied a lot of paint, you can almost feel the ridges on the paint. Here is another piece with a lot of texture, and as I move it in the light, you can see everything on here can be touched and felt. It all feels a little bit differently. Some of these areas I pushed the paint around with a butter knife and got it kind of smooth, and some of these areas are very rough and scratchy. But texture can also play an art in abstract, or I'm sorry, texture can also play a part in abstract art as well. So today we're going to learn about an artist, and his name is Piet Mondrian. And yes, that is the way his first name is spelled, P-I-E-T. And he was an abstract artist whose vision kind of grew over time. And so let's take a moment and watch a video of how Piet Mondrian's style grew slowly over time. He lived in the early 1900s, so these paintings are from 1908, 1909, or just about 100 years ago. He was an artist that you could see slowly start to change over time through his artwork. As we've moved from 1908 to 1912, you can see he's starting to use a lot more square shapes in his art. He's still painting trees, but through time they start to become more geometric, until they almost don't look like trees at all anymore. And here's where things start to become a little familiar. This is where most people recognize Piet Mondrian's artwork from. This is one of the first pieces he ever made in his recognizable signature style. And here he is. This is Mr. Piet Mondrian. Here is a self-portrait that he painted of himself. And here is a photograph of him in front of some of his artwork. But this is the artwork that he made, and it uses bright, bold primary colors and solid black lines against a white background to be very expressive. Now, you have to remember that these artworks are over 100 years old, so 100 years ago, this was kind of futuristic art. Nobody had ever done anything like this before, and he was really making a statement by putting this out there. So today we are going to try and make an artwork in the style of Piet Mondrian, and it's pretty easy to do. Let me pull up my camera here. First, let me grab an example of a finished project so I can show you where we're going. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have a client?
Yes, I'm doing a recording right now.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay, I'll come and see you in a minute.
No, it wasn't that.
All right.
I was talking for that. Okay, thanks.
Sorry for the interruption, boys and girls. So I have a piece of artwork here, and this is from Stevie Odoms, who is a third grader, I believe, or second grader. She is a second grader, that's right. So you can see that she has lots of rectangular and square shapes that are kind of overlapping on top of each other. So this is where we're going to go today, and these colors could be the colors you choose, or you could choose any colors you like. But here are the supplies that you will need. You're going to need, first of all, a pencil. You're going to need some square pieces of paper that have been cut out, Cardstock works best if you can cut out some small rectangles and big rectangles and small squares and big squares, but if you don't have any of those, that's all right. You can use anything that's square that you can trace. So you could find some sticky notes or a crayon box. Anything that's rectangular or square and that's small enough that it can fit on your paper, you can trace. You will also need a black marker, and you will need either crayons, colored pencils, or markers. Here's one more way that you can make some squares if you don't have any at home. You can take a normal piece of paper, any old piece of paper will do, and fold it in half, and fold it in half again, and then fold it in half one more time. Then you get a square that's small enough that you can fold on. The last thing you'll need is a blank piece of paper. So here is Mr. D's. Alright, the first thing I'm going to do is take some of my paper squares and rectangles that have been cut out. I'm just going to pick 6 or 7 of them. I don't need that many. And one at a time, I'm going to place these down on my paper and hold them with 2 fingers, then trace around with my pencil, carefully and slowly. It's okay if you make a mistake here because we're going to trace over them with a marker and you won't really see it if you have one. So every time I place down a new shape, I'm going to make sure it overlaps on top of one that I've already drawn. And I'm going to fill up the entire page this way. Take your time when you're tracing. There's no rush to get through this. Almost there. I think just a few more should be good enough. And I think just one more I'll put down here. Alright, once you've got all your pencil lines drawn, then it's time to pick up your marker and trace over all of them. Take your time and make them nice and straight. Alright, almost done drawing my outlines, and there we go. Now that you have your outlines, it's time to start coloring. So, there's only one real rule when it comes to coloring in a piece of artwork like this. You don't want to have one color touch itself whenever you cross one of these black lines. And what Mr. D means by that is, I'll start with coloring in this rectangle here, for example. Alright, now that this rectangle here is orange, none of the spaces around it can also be orange. So every time it crosses this black line, it needs to be a different color. So for my next square, I think I'm going to pull out a blue. And I'll color in this square blue. Alright, got to keep it moving. Let's pull out a yellow now. I'll just keep coloring it in like this, one square at a time. Now you can repeat and use the same colors over and over again if you like. So I'm going to do that with these 6 colors that I've already used. So I've got a purple, a light green, a pink, a blue, a yellow, and an orange. Normally I would just time-lapse through this part and make it go faster, but since I'm streaming to YouTube, we'll just have to sit through this part with Mr. D. But if you're following along with me, just keep coloring it on in. Do, just gonna keep going. It takes some time, but it'll be worth it in the end. We are getting really close here. Alright, my last little piece here is going to be green, I think. And I'll just quickly scribble it in. Do. Alrighty. And there is my finished Piet Mondrian art piece. And just for an example, here's the first one that I showed you. Alright, so yours should turn out somewhere between these two. And that is it for today, boys and girls. Just real quick, we'll review some abstract art. Here are a couple pieces, and remember, abstract art is nothing like reality. So sometimes there are objects that you can make out, sometimes not. But in any case, it's going to have some very bright, bold colors usually, some big shapes and patterns, and lots of lines. Like we learned today, we did lots of lines in this Piet Mondrian artwork. Lines, shapes, color, and forms are what make up most of abstract art. So boys and girls, I hope you enjoyed that incitement today. Have a great day, stay safe and healthy, and I will see you next time in the art lab. Thank you, boys, girls.